We're with John Duran and Mark Braunstein, both veterans of the local Sonoma County music scene. Gentlemen, hello, welcome.
Good.
It's
Hello
good to
there,
have you
how are
both.
you? Nice to be here.
I think collectively between the two of you, we have like 200 years of local musical.
Seems that way.
In our time,
Yes,
yes.
it's kind of like dog ears.
Well, both of you guys were involved with local venues, but before you got involved with those and then the scene as musicians and knowing all the musicians and all the other many things that you guys do, you were in different places. You in Los Angeles, Mr. Duran, and you, Mr. Braunstein, in San Francisco.
That is correct.
How is it you both ended up here in Sonoma County at relatively the same time to create the effect that you have?
I came up here because I didn't want to continue in Los Angeles, and I loved the music scene in Southern California, but my future was in a more rural area.
Yeah.
So when I was old enough to go to college, I left the Southern California area and moved up here to go to college.
Was it really just the urban thing? You didn't want to be part of the...
I didn't want to be part of a big city, and I wanted to raise my future family, because I didn't have one at the time,
Right.
but I wanted to raise it in an environment that I thought was more conducive to raise children in not a big city like I came from in Los Angeles.
So did you go to SSU? Is that what I'm...
Yeah, I went to Sonoma State when it was Granola U before it was
Right.
SSU.
So you went from one concrete jungle to another.
Right,
That place is all
exactly. That's
concrete,
what,
yeah.
and it was in those days.
Yeah.
But fortunately, when I got up here, there was at least a Seminole music scene burgeoning at the end of the beginning, which was when I
So
met
this
Mark.
is 70s?
I came here in '70
Okay.
originally
Yeah.
to go to
And Mark,
college.
you were one of the guys who founded the Inn of the...
No.
You weren't.
No,
You were one of the guys who
absolutely
went
not.
to the Inn of the Beginning.
No, not even that.
Do you even know the Inn of the Beginning?
Yes, I do.
You know where the beginning ends.
Right.
I mean, I moved to Cotati in 1970,
Okay.
just as there was a transition from the founder, Greg Cochran,
Okay.
selling to the second owner, Ward Maillard.
Okay.
And so I, at some point, when they got through remodeling, asked for a job as the sound man, because I had experience in technical and stage work with
Right.
rock bands in San Francisco. I moved up here because I stopped working for a rock band.
Which band, could I ask?
That one, at the time, It's a Beautiful Day.
Okay.
I had spent some time with them and then stopped. And then friends of mine lived on Sonoma Mountain Road and commuted to San Francisco, worked for Bill Graham, wanted to live in the city. We swapped houses. I ended up on 55 acres on Sonoma Mountain.
That's great. At BGP, did you work with Bernadine Ferguson?
No, I never really worked with BGP.
Okay.
They did. They were part of Bill Graham management,
Mm-hmm.
not the presentation part.
Right, right.
So we just swapped houses, and I came up with no job, knew a few people,
Yeah.
and knew about the Inn of the Beginning, was aware that that existed, went down there, and they said, well, come back in a month, we're building, and I did. I came
So-
back for a month.
What was the scene like then? And let's kind of canvas what the music scene was, because it seems like it kind of was small, kind of then ramped rather rapidly, and then plateaued, and then kind of dipped, and then I want to know where we are now. So
There was actually two of those ups and downs.
yeah, it seems so. Like
Probably
in the
so.
like late 70s, early 80s, and then the 90s again. It came back for a bit. And where are we now? I don't know. But let's talk about what was like then. What was happening then? What did it sound like?
It was a local scene. For me, at the Inn, it was a local scene. It was a community gathering place. There were a lot of local bands. I think one of the things, regular scheduled programming, where every Sunday night was a free folk night,
Right on.
where anybody could walk in, and that was where I first met Kate Wolf. It was like, I say, Kate, you're here again. You were just here for the last 6 weeks.
Well,
And everyone got 20 minutes of fame.
That's great. Yeah.
and at that time, I actually was opening the Belvedere, which we kind of rolling ahead into 1976, because
Right.
I had gone through the college thing and wanted to get into a music venue, and opened the Belvedere, which is an old Victorian in Mendocino. The building's still there, but at that time it was a dinner house and cabaret. And Kate Wolf was playing there, as well as other local artists. And essentially, it was kind of the roots of the beginning of the music scene for Sonoma County. And a lot of the people that played there were people that had moved from San Francisco or LA, moved to the country to be in more of a country environment, and then were going around trying to find venues to play it, and there virtually weren't any in those days.
So that's interesting. So, see, having grown up here, to me, the music scene was, like the nascent music scene that I was part of was the result of having come up with all these guys and that kind of thing natively. But you're saying it really was started back in that day by people coming from different places and bringing their desire to create music here.
And there were local artists here as well that already lived here, but a lot of the people were kind of fleeing the big cities at the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s and trying to create a new lifestyle, and this became an ideal place, obviously, just like that's why people are still coming here.
Right, yeah.
You know, but in those days when I moved here, there was 45,000 people in Santa Rosa. Now there's 157,000, so it's 3 times the size. It was a much smaller community, and so there were fewer venues because where would you play? You would play at a little restaurant that would allow you to put your hat out there for tips, and you know, you'd play a single guitarist or a single flutist or something. You couldn't have a band anywhere because there were so few venues. We were talking the other day, there were most of them were piano bars and things like that.
Wow, that's crazy. It's kind of a holdover from a different era, and then you guys kind of appropriated it and made it work.
Not appropriated, it was going on. I mean, there was a routing issue for the inn. I'll speak for the inn anyway. Is that Greg was the convenience of being an hour away from San Francisco allowed people who were performing at the Coffee Gallery in North Beach, at the boarding house in the early 70s, to pay for their hotel rooms by coming up to this small venue that didn't compete with them.
Right.
So there were, Booker White was performing, Ramblin' Jack Elliott would perform, Cat Mother and the All Night Newsboys, and who lived in Mendocino. So there was a bit of a local scene. The Bronze Hog were very, very strong at the end of the beginning, just a 3-piece rock band of students. Some were students,
They were
some
probably,
were dropouts.
people associated them with probably the beginning of the Sonoma Sound, if there was such a thing at that time.
And Hayhurst, Frank Hayhurst
Right,
was part of the Bronze
Hayhurst and
Hog,
Don, the drummer.
John Connolly.
So what was that sound back then?
It was rock and roll.
Yeah, it was hard edge rock and roll with a country tang.
Okay, which is kind of where it's going back to.
But now there's a backbeat.
Yeah.
That was a bluesy backbeat, I think we've got.
And then what happened? It got really saturated. It seems at some point. I mean, there was like venues dotting all over the place.
Sebastopol needed its own venue.
And do you
west
think
of the Laguna opened up.
Right. So was there something that happened?
And then there was a place, Brothers or something?
Brothers was in about Pocket Canyon.
Right.
Did it get diluted
Sam's.
with all the new venues? Did it sort of make the scene spread out too thin, or?
I don't think. No, I think.
Okay.
I don't, in my opinion, it did not get diluted. There was more opportunities for performers to actually earn a living and practice their craft.
And could they actually earn a living? Because
No.
I know that's,
No.
Yeah, okay.
And I think the demographics changed as well. I
Yeah.
mean, and the audiences changed,
Yeah.
and that's a big part of what happens is that what sells one night doesn't sell 2 years later because those people have matured, now have families, they're at home with their kids, and they're not going to go out listening to the same kind of music they might have 3 or 4 years ago. So that's part of the thing with the music scene is as it evolves to the different markets that it's trying to appeal to. And that's been a challenge throughout all the years, is having venues be able to sustain themselves and sustain the market. Because what happens is, I know even in other venues, other endeavors that both of us have tried to do later, you're appealing to a smaller and smaller demographic who now are at home. Their kids are 6 and 7 years old. They're not going to go out any longer, whether it's rock and roll or rhythm and blues or jazz. It's just they're not going to be going out anymore. So now who do you appeal to?
Right.
So,
and then the sort of feeder school, so to speak, like Sonoma State, which brings in a new class of kids every year, has changed demographically. At one point in the 90s, they tried to become a business school, and as a consequence, you get a bunch of squares coming up who don't go out and that kind of thing.
Well, it was also in my time period in the 70s and 80s even, it was very much a commuter school. It was a much older demographic of student, people coming back to the colleges. I've got a job, I'm coming to take classes here and I'm going home. No, I'm not hanging out at the end of the beginning at 4 in the afternoon drinking beers with my professor.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't happen
But
anymore.
you would show up if you found out that somebody from Huey Lewis's band was going to be there that night, and that was, I think, the appeal of both the end of the beginning, then later the Cabaret and the Studio Kafe is our proximity to the city meant that you never knew who was going to show up and sit in, and that the fact that people did show up and sit in with their friends because this is such a wonderful place to come and play at and visit, allowed us to capture people you would normally never capture in these kind of small venues. I mean, who gets major artists to come into a 100-seat venue just to sit in for the fun of it? It just
Not
doesn't
very
happen.
often.
I got you guys. So
Yes.
yeah. Well, we're talking with John Duran and Mark Braunstein. We'll be right back on 707.
Morning, Gary. We are GetSchooled.com. You want a college education, don't you? You know you do. That's why we're here. We're free and here to guide you through every step of the way, starting with attendance. Gary, financial aid forms. Picking a college, man. You and us. Go together like tacos and Tuesday.
And I love tacos. Go to GetSchooled.com.
We're with John Duran and Mark Braunstein, veterans of the local music scene, who have between them the Smithsonian's basically
Archival.
this is the Smithsonian Archive of Sonoma County's music scene right here, live with us here at 7 to 7. We were just speaking during the break about what has changed, and one thing you pointed out, Mark, I thought was interesting, is that in the beginning used to be more of a scene. Right.
Much more of a scene where there's a sociality surrounding it, where it was really not important who was performing, how good they were. Mm-hmm. It was just, it's something new. There was a curiosity, for whatever reason, about music and new music.
And an openness,
Let's
it sounds
be here.
like.
An openness to experience new things. It didn't hurt that the admission charges were in the $1, $2. The big nights were $3. We were charging $2 to come and hear Charlie Musselwhite on a Saturday night or a Friday night.
Which would be like 25 now at least.
It may be. We were paying 12 cents a gallon for gas at the time, so
Amazing.
it's like it was there. So it was just, there was that collegiality too. I mean, the college just brought in curious people, and that did change as we started getting more famous people. The expectation changed.
I would imagine. And then we fast forward a little bit to the Studio Kafe, which you were the founder of. It seems like there was a distillation in the scene, and it came down to some very key, like specific players. Like what was happening there, and what was the Studio Kafe concept?
Studio Kafe concept was to create a multimedia experience for the people that came into it as the customer, and to be able to provide food and entertainment along with beverages in a production environment. And
by production we mean like radio production.
It was a radio and TV production. My background was in TV and motion pictures and Hollywood as a prop man, and I always was intrigued by the business, and so it was kind of the dream was to recreate that environment on a local scale. And we wanted to create it with a radio station so that we could say, hey, if you like what you're listening to on the stage, come on down, this is happening live on the stage of Studio Kafe. But we didn't have $1 million or $3 million to buy a radio station, so we came up with the idea of doing cable radio, and we basically used the public access, similar to what you're doing. Went to Post Newsweek and negotiated a lease for one of their airlines, which was 96.1, and that was Cafe Radio, KAFE. And we created a radio booth in the front, and we did 24-hour a day radio with live shows. And so every day of the week we had some kind of entertainment, and we would tape them live, give the band a copy, and then put it on the radio for public consumption.
Very cool concept, and I was just old enough to kind of remember.
Just old enough.
But seriously, I remember walking by and seeing the mics, and
Right.
and I was just fascinated. It's a super cool concept. Do you think you'll ever bring that back to life in some way or other?
I think I think in some different incarnations it's already come to life in different ways, through different TV shows that mimic the concept, and
right.
And I think that it will come back in different forms. I'm not sure how I would be involved necessarily, but I think that the issue at that time was nobody had any confidence in cable radio from an advertising standpoint.
Or like early 80s, early mid 80s?
We opened in we built it in 86, opened it in 87, and ran it till New Year's 91. So, and during that time we were trying to sell cable radio spots for $7, $7.50 a radio spot. And we're having trouble because you couldn't prove listenership. Right. And people didn't understand you had to get this little splitter and connect it to cable, and you could actually get better reception than you would get in a normal radio. So we were trying to educate the public on this is how you get really pure, clean sound, and you can hear live bands, local bands as well as nationally known artists, live by coming into the cafe. So that was the concept, and we had a great time for a while. It was hard to sustain.
Any particular acts you want to shout out from the day that came through?
Oh, we had tons of them. Charles Brown, just before he passed away, did a wonderful concert. We had Counting Crow when they were Mr. Dog.
Yes, Mr. Dog, really terrific.
Right, and we had. We were very, very fortunate that we were able to make an arrangement at one point with Slim's, and they didn't want anybody to play within 50 miles of Slim's.
Right.
But a lot of the people that came to the Bay Area, right. A lot of the people that came to the Bay Area wanted to be able to perform in the North Bay because it's such a wonderful place to play in the vacation. So we would be able to pull in a lot of the national acts that were playing at Slim's, and they would just play us on the next night after the weekend, and we could do a Monday or Tuesday show and sell out without any problem. Because we were 200 seats, so it was a pretty small venue to see a major national traveling act. And we got Mick Taylor from the Stones after he went on his solo career. So we were.
That's huge.
It was huge at the time. But we had the radio station. We were able to record things live, give somebody a a live tape. So a lot of bands would say, oh, I can get a live recorded tape of my show and send to clubs all over the country.
Yeah.
So it was a good calling card, and we'd give it to them free for playing in the club. So
And it's a great resource for them to have, too. It's pretty remarkable. And so you said 200 seats for the
we started at 100 seats, and then we later expanded to 200.
Cotati Cabaret. What was the capacity there?
That was closer to 300 in assembly, and we would get 250 people in a seated show. When we had listening attractions, you just rows of chairs with an occasional table to put a drink on.
But you had big acts there too. You had Van
absolutely,
Morrison, Jerry Garcia,
Yes.
Devo played there. I
Yes,
remember.
that's
right.
right.
I think they played their last live show there.
The Cramps performed there.
The Cramps, really? I didn't know that.
Huey Lewis, Dave Mason.
Well, I mean, Huey and the crew played through all incarnations of
Right.
Clover, and which wasn't really, but still after
Yeah.
American Express and Huey Lewis and the News and Huey Lewis and American Express. So
Right.
he was pretty steady with us.
So what happened? Why did the cabaret shut down? I mean, it seemed like it was so happening.
I would say that Ken Frankel and I were the operators. Ken Frankel owned the property.
Yeah.
We were not interested in following the market.
Okay. Yeah, you had your own tastes, and yeah.
We had I don't want to say responsibility, but it's certainly a keen interest in providing a venue for people to communicate their art.
Right.
We didn't necessarily like everything we hired. We liked the people generally, and
Yeah.
we liked
No, I mean,
how they
in
showed
the
up.
era that you guys shut it down,
1989.
there was like this kind of like electronic dance music was happening. You could have done that and had a bunch of teenagers.
We did do that. We invested money in, I think, mid-'80s and brought in a disco system, and we brought it in every Friday night. It was
And that probably drove you
video-
crazy. Yeah.
It enabled us
Yeah.
to hire Olatunji
Yeah.
and survive having 87 people come to hear them.
Right.
It enabled us to take a chance on, Ron Thompson and the Resistors. I mean, some Roy Rogers and the Delta Twisters, or whatever. Some lesser known acts. We knew that it supported it, but no, it didn't make us happy.
I think there's another factor though, because thinking back during that time, that was during what would have been the heyday of the cafe in the late '80s, and there was a huge change in the whole social mores at that time in terms of sexual awareness and drinking and driving, and it went from 2.0 to 1.0 or whatever.
That didn't help.
Right.
the
And then
bars-
AIDS was happening.
Right.
It just, sort
and
of
you had law
awareness, rather.
enforcement
Yeah.
people doing their job, sitting outside of clubs where they knew there were 200 people who had been partying for 4 hours. And it didn't take long for word to get out that lifestyle probably wasn't going to continue very long. And
Yeah.
I think that had a huge effect, along with people just aging and saying, okay, well, I did that, I went through that period of my life. So, that had its
I hear
effect
you.
as well.
We're speaking with John Duran and Mark Braunstein, veterans of the local music scene. We're going to pick up where we left off just after this break.
Thank you, dear. Well, you're very supple. Just like I was at your age. Back then, I was a sex expert. Used to call me the buttered biscuit. I know about birth control, too. So you can ask me anything, baby.
Bedsider.org has birth control information and a lot more. And it's...
Have you had sex in this car yet?
We're with John Duran and Mark Braunstein, veterans of Sonoma County's music scene. They've been in and out of it in so many ways, I can't even begin to cover it, except, speaking of what's covering you guys, new T-shirts. These have changed suddenly during the break. Mark, what do we have here? David Lindley?
This is a commemorative T-shirt for probably one of the times that David Lindley and El Rayo X played at the Cotati Cabaret.
And this, we were just speaking of the Studio Kafe. That is in remarkably good shape, sir. That's
I had to go through my closet, but I wanted to be able to bring it because this was our logo, and this is the radio station. It used to say the place to play in the North Bay.
Yeah.
But in addition to music, one of the things that is very involved in music is comedy.
Very good.
And so here you have Pat Paulson, and I wore that in honor of Pat Paulson, who announced he was running for president at the Studio Kafe. So in terms of things that people that performed at the cafe, Pat Paulson performed and announced he was running for president, which is one of our claim to fame. And we had the press conference there. So
that is very cool.
We tried to always have comedy to mix in with the music.
Yeah, it's a fascinating concept. I hope it comes back in some way or form, because having a place to do that is just...
Well, we ought to do it here. Let's do it
we
through
could do it
C
here.
Media.
We could totally do Studio Kafe here.
Okay, let's do it.
Pick a day.
All right.
Anyway, so before we
Before we
sign anything,
Before we start planning.
let's talk about where you guys see kind of a snapshot of the current music scene. I know we talked about the peaks and valleys. Certainly something happened in the 90s, and it feels like something's happening again, or am I just pretending? Am I just hallucinating that there's an awareness now? Are we busting at performers that are getting nationally known? I mean, it seems something's beginning to percolate. What's your take?
I agree. I've not paid a huge amount of attention to the music scene because I don't need to.
Right.
But I am finding more acts that I'm drawn to and enjoy listening to, local acts that in the singer-songwriter vein. There was a big lull for me in the late 80s and early 90s when rap and spoken word and hip-hop and hard death metal and such was just getting to be stronger, and I just said, no thanks, this is not for me. And we're starting to see this whole Americana genre of music, it's folk music.
It's folk music with a rock twist.
It's a cowpunk, right? There's a strain that came up in the 90s, and it seems to have matured finally.
Well, I think locally, I mean, David Lunning is an example, I think is someone who's come up locally, who's, interesting enough, his father worked at the Studio Kafe and helped sell radio station airtime for the cafe. So his roots are in the cafe's music scene.
That's great.
And I think he has a really unique sound, and I think he's captured a little bit of the flavor of the Sonoma County sound, if there is such a one.
And he got some attention, American Idol and stuff. So that's great. And then who's the gentleman who composed? He's a singer-songwriter based in Petaluma, and he had a song placed on a Mitsubishi commercial or something recently, or a Ford commercial.
Would that be Norman Greenbaum?
No.
Well, he has songs placed in every commercial.
We have Sean Hayes is here now. He moved here from San Francisco. He's my neighbor. And so there's the talent pool seems to be really stepping up a bit.
It's deepening.
I think one of the things Mark and I had talked about prior to sitting down with you is that there are a lot of really great world-class artists that live in our community, but they don't want to perform in our community because they want some anonymity about where they live.
The Tom Waits factor.
The Tom Waits factor. There are other people, but they don't, they live here, they enjoy the community, they don't want to have to perform in their community because then they can't live in it in the same way. And I understand that, but that for local club owners and stuff, that's always been a challenge because we've always tried to reach out. Charlie Musselwhite has always been wonderful. He's always played. He played the cafe and he played, he plays around. But but it's hard to get some of the really great local talent. And and the other thing is hopefully there'll be more venues coming online, frankly, because I think there are a lot of young bands right now, a lot of singer-songwriters, and they need a venue to perform in to get their chops down. I mean,
but these days the venues seem to be the attraction. Does
check this guy out, man?
Does Spoon Bar really need a rock band in there? I'm thinking about Healdsburg. I mean, the scene becomes the bartenders are the attractions. The bartenders and the
it's because music isn't the credibility issue. It's not about
the credibility.
It doesn't have, and even when in a lot of the great venues that are in this area, without getting into specifics, they don't have the kind of sound that you need to create the quality of sound. I mean, one of the things we tried to do at the cafe, and I know you did at the Cabaret, is have really top-flight professional mixers mixing sound so that it actually sounds good to the band.
Yes.
I mean, that makes all the difference in the world to a band to know they're being mixed properly. And I mean, and the club needs to be able to generate revenue to hire those professional sound people.
So what do you see in the future then? Like, as guys who've seen the scene from its beginning and into its present state, what do you guys prognosticate for the future of Sonoma County's music scene?
More concerts.
More live shows, really? Okay.
I think more concerts, and I think that more, and I don't think that's a plus. I mean,
really?
What you mean is more larger venue concerts, not smaller venue concerts.
I invited my daughter to go to the city last weekend to hear, just to experience Hardly Strictly Bluegrass.
Right.
I mean, she's been there, and I went, and no, I don't want to go. Well, don't you like live music? How can you be my daughter and not enjoy live music? Well, I love live music. I just have to know who it is. I have no interest in...
Interesting. So she needs the brand name. Right,
yes, I need the brand name. I don't have any interest in going when I don't know what I'm going to hear. I said, well, that's the whole point of live music, is not knowing what you're going to experience.
Yeah, but you know what? I think you made a very good point, and that is that because I feel the same way with a lot of the young generation kids that I know, and that is that they'll go to a huge concert to see somebody like Justin Timberlake, but they won't go out to a local club to see a starting burgeoning band because they
Absolutely.
have no interest in it.
Because no prior awareness or no affinity.
No interest whatsoever, because just the fact, the idea of going strictly for the sake of hearing live music for the art form of performance
On its own, just in the abstract.
just in the abstract doesn't have the value. And I think that's unfortunate, because it should. And that's why Mark was saying it's not such a great thing that there are all these bigger shows, because you're not going to get the burgeoning artists in a bigger show. That means you only get
There's
people
no
who've already
support.
made it.
So how do you fix that? How do you make seeing live music for its own sake locally a thing again?
House concerts are fixing that
Okay.
to an extent.
That's great, because we trust the taste of our hosts,
yes,
Right.
that's
regardless
correct.
if we know the performer or not. Okay.
And that is what I was trying at the inn. And at the Cabaret. All I want is for you folks to trust me.
Well,
you're onto something.
If this is here, if I'm charging $5 for
There's
an
a reason
admission,
you are,
There's
yeah.
a reason for this.
It's like it's a curatorial thing. Like
Yeah,
most
very
people
much,
who
yes.
who love Blue Note jazz records will buy
Right.
anything they put out
because
they
the
trust
quality they expect,
Right.
they already have a standard they can expect they're going to get.
So for a venue to succeed here, then we have to know there's a tastemaker that's selecting the groups,
Yes.
curating the experience, so we can go drop the $5 or $10 or $15 to see a show and trust that we're going to have a real entertainment
That's right.
experience.
And they're
Okay.
called program directors. And
Right.
you know, at the cafe, we were fortunate that at the time we had Steve Jackson and then later Bill Bowker as
Yeah.
our program director, and Doug Smith, who worked with me in booking all the entertainment. So we had a great support, and that it only happens through the support of other people that are, you know, one person doesn't make it happen, obviously.
So I think we're onto something. I think we're getting close to a solution. Will you guys come back and help riff this out a little further so that we can, like, you know, no, seriously, we'll come
Yes.
back, we'll continue this conversation, we'll fix the music scene, you know.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay,
we'll
good.
fix it.
I see a bar over here and some chairs over there.
Excellent. Okay, we got John Duran and Mark Braunstein. Thank you, fellas, for coming, and looking forward to next time you're here.
Hey,
okay?
we appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming out.
A pleasure.
Yeah, looking forward. All right.